There is a piece of ground so sacred that a king's gold cannot buy it. A man so anchored to God's word that a queen's fury cannot move him, and a refusal so costly it would shake the throne of heaven itself. What makes a vineyard worth more than life? Can one man's no to a king change the destiny of a nation? And when injustice screams louder than prayer, does God hear? In the next 80 minutes, you'll witness the collision between human power and divine covenant, a story that will redefine what it means to stand firm when everything tells you to bow. You'll see a humble farmer face down the most powerful throne in Israel. You'll watch as silence becomes the most dangerous act of worship, and you'll discover that some inheritances are worth dying for because they were never ours to surrender in the first place. If you're ready for a story that will anchor your soul, subscribe and turn on the bell. Naboth stands at the edge of his vineyard at dusk, his calloused hands running along the leaves of vines his grandfather planted. The soil beneath his feet is dark and rich, fed by generations of faithful labor. Each row tells a story: his father's sweat, his grandfather's prayers, his own son's learning to prune and tend. This is not just land, this is covenant, this is memory made visible. In the distance, the palace of Jezreel glows with torchlight. King Ahab walks through the streets of his city, restless and calculating. His eyes constantly search for what he does not yet possess. Tonight they fall upon Naboth's vineyard, situated so close to the palace walls that he can hear the vines rustling in the evening breeze. It would make a perfect herb garden, he thinks, a quiet place for leisure, away from the noise of court politics and the weight of the crown. The next morning, Ahab decides to inspect the property himself. He enters the vineyard uninvited, his royal robes trailing through the dirt. His fingers brush the grape clusters, still green and growing. He calculates silently the yield, the location, the possibilities. Naboth watches from across the field, unease stirring in his chest. Kings do not visit common vineyards without reason. That evening, a royal messenger arrives at Naboth's door. The young man bows stiffly, holding a sealed parchment bearing the signet of King Ahab. Naboth's wife stands behind him, her face tight with concern. Their sons gather close, sensing something momentous in the air. Naboth breaks the seal and unrolls the scroll. The message is brief and direct. Give me your vineyard that I may have it for a vegetable garden because it is near my house. I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money. The words hang in the air like a threat wrapped in generosity. Naboth reads them twice, his jaw tightening. His wife leans over his shoulder, her breath catching. What will you say? She whispers. Naboth does not answer immediately. He walks slowly to the corner of the vineyard where a small stone altar sits, barely visible beneath moss and creeping vines. It is ancient, built by his great-grandfather when the land was first allotted to their family. Carved into the weathered stone, barely legible, are the words, "Inheritance of the Lord," Leviticus 25. He kneels there in the dirt, his hands pressed flat against the earth. The messenger shifts uncomfortably behind him, waiting for a response. Naboth closes his eyes. In his mind, he hears the words of Moses passed down through scrolls and synagogue readings, embedded in his soul since childhood. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. This is not his land to sell. It never was. He rises slowly, brushing the dirt from his knees. He turns to face the messenger, his voice quiet but unshakable. Tell the king this. I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers. The messenger's eyes widen. He stammers. You refuse the king. I do not refuse the king, Naboth replies. I obey the Lord. The messenger stares at him as if he has just pronounced his own death sentence. In the kingdom of Ahab and Jezebel, no one refuses the king, not the priests, not the prophets who have survived this long by bending. Certainly not a vineyard keeper from Jezebel. The young man backs away slowly, clutching the scroll as if it has suddenly become dangerous. I will deliver your message. Naboth watches him disappear down the road toward the palace. His wife comes to stand beside him, her hand finding his coat. Have you done? She whispers. What I must, he answers. That night Naboth cannot sleep. He sits alone in the vineyard under the stars, a worn scroll of Deuteronomy open on his lap. His finger traces the ancient words by lamplight. You shall not move your neighbor's landmark which the men of old have set in your inheritance. He looks out at the rows of vines, each one a generation. If he sells this land, he does not just sell grapes and soil, he sells his sons' names. He sells the promise God made to their fathers when Joshua divided the land by lot. He sells the future. His voice cracks as he prays into the darkness. Father, this is all I have to give my sons. If I sell this, I sell their name. I sell your promise. Tell me I have chosen rightly. The wind moves through the vines, stirring the leaves into a whisper. There is no voice from heaven, no angel with a flaming sword. Only the stillness that comes when a man has planted his feet on the word of God and will not be moved. But in the palace, the stillness is very different. Ahab returns from his meeting with advisors and collapses onto his bed, turning his face to the wall. He refuses the evening meal. His servants exchange worried glances. They have seen the king sulk before, but never like this. Not over land, not over something so small. One servant whispers to another, "The king is ill." "No," the other replies. Watching Ahab's shoulders shake with frustration, the king has been told no, and he does not know what to do with it. Word begins to spread through Jezreel like smoke from an unattended fire. At the city gate, where elders gather to conduct business and settle disputes, the news arrives by midday. Naboth refused the king. Naboth, the quiet vineyard keeper who has never raised his voice in the assembly, has defied the throne of Israel. The elders sit in stunned silence. Finally, one of them speaks. He refused. He invoked the law of Moses. Another elder adds, his voice low. He said it was the inheritance of his fathers. An old man with a gray beard shakes his head slowly. The boy is a fool. Ahab does not ask twice. But a younger elder, a man who knew Naboth's father, looks up sharply. Or maybe he fears God more than he fears Ahab. The words land like a stone in still water. No one responds immediately. They all know the truth of it. In the years since Ahab married Jezebel, the worship of Baal has spread like plague through Israel. Altars to foreign gods stand on every high place. The prophets of the Lord have been hunted, killed, or silenced. To invoke the law of Moses in Ahab's court is not piety. It is treason. A merchant passing by overhears the conversation and laughs bitterly. God doesn't pay taxes. God doesn't protect you from Jezebel's blade. Naboth is a fool and fools die poor. But the younger elder does not laugh. He rises and walks away. The merchant's words echoing in his mind. He wonders, not for the first time, when faithfulness became foolishness in Israel. That night Naboth sits in the vineyard again. His wife has stopped asking him to reconsider. His sons watch him with the mixture of fear and pride they do not yet understand. He opens the scroll of Deuteronomy once more, his finger finding the passage that has become his anchor. The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers. He speaks the words aloud, tasting their weight. They are not his words. They are older than his grandfather, older than the vineyard, older than the throne of Israel. They are the words of covenant, and covenant cannot be negotiated. The next morning, the royal servant returns. He approaches Naboth's door reluctantly, as if delivering a message he knows will be refused. The king is generous, he says, his voice strained. He asks you to reconsider. Name your price. Naboth meets his eyes. His reply is calm, but it carries the force of a movable stone. The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers. The servant's face drains of color. Naboth has done it again, invoked the name of the Lord in direct opposition to the king's desire. This is no longer a business transaction. This is a theological declaration. This is a man saying that God's law stands above the king's command. The servant backs away without another word. He knows what this means. He knows where this is heading, and he wants no part of what is coming. As the servant disappears down the road, Naboth's youngest son tugs at his robe. "Father, why does the king want our vineyard?" Naboth kneels down, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Because, my son, men always want what is not theirs. But some things are not ours to give, even if we wanted to. This land belongs to the Lord. We are only keeping it for him." The boy nods, not fully understanding, but trusting. What Naboth does not yet know, what he cannot see from his quiet vineyard, is that his refusal has just set in motion the machinery of evil that will not stop until blood is spilled. In the palace, Ahab lies on his bed, facing the wall, refusing food like a petulant child. And somewhere in the halls of power, Jezebel is about to hear the story of a man who said no. When faithfulness becomes rebellion, how long before the throne strikes back? Ahab lies on his bed, his face turned to the wall like a sulking child. The king of Israel, commander of armies, ruler of 10 tribes, has been reduced to this, refusing food, refusing counsel, refusing to speak. His servants move quietly through the chamber, unsure whether to stay or leave. They have seen him angry before, seen him violent, seen him drunk with power and wine. But this is different. This is defeat, and it has unmanned him. The afternoon sun slants through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. Footsteps approach, light, deliberate, dangerous. The servants scatter like birds before a storm. Jezebel enters the chamber, her silk robes whispering against the stone floor. She is a woman who has never known powerlessness. never bent her knee to anyone, not even the gods she claims to serve. Her beauty is sharp like a blade hidden in velvet. She stands at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, studying her husband with barely concealed contempt. Why is your spirit so sullen that you eat no food? Her voice drips with mockery. This is the man who sits on the throne of Israel pouting over produce. Ahab does not turn to face her. His voice is small, wounded. Because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else, if it please you, I will give you another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give you my vineyard. The silence that follows is heavy. Jezebel's eyes narrow. She moves closer, her shadow falling across her husband's prostrate form. When she speaks again, her voice is low and venomous. Do you now govern Israel? The question cuts deeper than any sword. She is not asking about vineyards. She is asking about power, about manhood, about the very essence of kingship. Do you govern Israel, or does a farmer in Jezreel govern you? Ahab says nothing. The answer is written in his silence. Jezebel's lips curl into a slow, dangerous smile. Arise, eat bread, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the She turns and leaves before he can respond. Ahab sits up slowly, his appetite suddenly returning. He does not ask how she will accomplish this. He does not want to know. That is the arrangement they have always had. He wears the crown and she wields the knife. He gets what he wants and his hands stay clean. But Jezebel's hands have never been clean, and she has no intention of starting now. She moves through the palace corridors like a lioness stalking prey. Her mind already calculating, arranging, orchestrating, she enters her private chamber and summons a scribe. The young man arrives trembling, knowing that those who serve Jezebel too closely rarely live long enough to boast of it. Write letters, she commands. In the king's name, seal them with his signet. The scribe's hand shakes as he prepares the parchment. Jezebel begins to dictate, her voice cold and precise. To the elders and nobles who dwell in Jezreel with Naboth, proclaim a fast and set Naboth at the head of the people, and set to worthless men opposite him, and let them bring a charge against him, saying, you have cursed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. The scribe's pen stops mid-word. He looks up, his face ashen. My lady, this is justice. Jezebel interrupts, her eyes like ice. This is what happens to men who defy the throne. Right? The scribe writes. His hand cramps as he copies the letter multiple times, one for each elder, each sealed with Ahab's royal signet. He knows he's writing a death warrant. He knows this is murder dressed in the language of law. But he also knows that to refuse Jezebel is to sign his own death warrant. When the letters are finished, Jezebel dismisses him with a wave. Send them today. I want this matter resolved before the week ends. The scribe bows and retreats, clutching the scrolls like contaminated things. As he walks through the palace, he passes servants who avert their eyes, guards who look at the floor. Everyone knows in the house of Ahab and Jezebel silence is survival. The letters reached Jezreel by evening. Messengers on horseback deliver them to the homes of elders and nobles, the men who hold power in the city, who interpret law, who are supposed to be the guardians of justice. One by one they break the seals and read. One of these men is named Azariah. He is old, his beard gray, his hands gnarled from a lifetime of honest work before he became an elder. He knew Naboth's father. He remembers when Naboth was a boy, learning to tend the vines, learning the prayers, learning what it meant to be part of the covenant people. Azariah reads the letter once, then twice. His hands begin to tremble. He looks up at his wife who watches him from across the room. What does it say? She asks. He cannot speak. He folds the letter slowly and sets it on the table. His wife comes closer, reading over his shoulder. When she finishes, her hand flies to her mouth. This is murder. This is the queen's will, Azariah replies, his voice hollow. Then refuse it. Tell the other elders, this is wrong. Stand with Naboth. Azariah looks at his wife with eyes full of sorrow and shame. If I refuse, Jezebel will kill me, and then she will kill Naboth anyway. At least if I stay silent, I survive. But at what cost? His wife whispers. Uriah does not answer. He knows the cost. He will pay it every day for the rest of his life. Across the city, other elders received the same letter. Some read it with shock. Others read it with grim acceptance. One or two read it with dark satisfaction. Naboth has always been too righteous, too proud, too unwilling to bend. Perhaps this will teach the common people not to defy their betters, but none of them refuse. Not one. In his vineyard, Naboth knows nothing of the letters, the plot, the machinery grinding toward him. He tends his vines as he has always done, his sons working beside him. The evening is cool, the sky stir with red and gold. It is the kind of evening that makes a man grateful to be alive. Grateful for the simple gift of earth and work and family, his wife calls him in for the evening meal. They gather around the table, bread and wine and olives. Naboth leads them in the ancient prayer, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth." His youngest son adds, "And who gave us this land as an inheritance?" Naboth smiles, his heart swelling with pride. The boy understands. The boy knows that some things are worth more than comfort, more than safety, more than the favor of kings. After the meal, Naboth walks the vineyard one last time before bed. He does not know this will be one of his final nights of peace. He does not know that in the city men are preparing to call his name in a public assembly. He does not know that lies are being rehearsed, stones are being selected, and justice is being buried beneath the weight of royal ambition. But he does know this. He has obeyed, and in a world where obedience has become rare, that is enough. The next morning, the city of Jezreel awakens to the sound of a ram's horn. A fast has been proclaimed. The people gather in the square, confused and anxious. Fasts are called for repentance, for mourning, for seeking God's face in times of crisis. But there has been no disaster, no plague, no invasion. Why this fast? Why now? The elders take their places at the head of the assembly. Azariah is among them, his face carefully neutral, his eyes fixed on the ground. The crowd murmurs, speculating. Then a name ripples through the gathering like a wave: Naboth. This is about Naboth. Naboth himself is brought forward, flanked by city officials. He walks with his head high, confusion written on his face but not fear. He has done nothing wrong. He has obeyed the law of Moses. Surely this assembly has been called to honor that, to affirm his faithfulness, to stand with him against the king's unlawful demand. He does not yet understand how deeply the rot has spread. The elders seat Naboth at the head of the people, a place of prominence. For a moment he feels a flicker of hope. Perhaps they are on his side. Perhaps justice will prevail after all. Then two men are brought forward. Naboth does not recognize them. Their eyes are hollow. Their faces hard. They are the kind of men who have nothing left to lose, the kind who will say anything for silver or survival. They sit opposite Naboth and the crowd falls silent. The first man stands. His voice is loud, rehearsed. Naboth cursed God, and the king gasps ripple through the assembly. Naboth's wife, standing in the crowd with their sons, covers her mouth with her hand. Her knees nearly buckle. The second man rises, echoing the first. He blasphemed the name. I heard him with my own ears. Naboth lurches to his feet, his voice breaking with shock and fury. I have not cursed. I have only obeyed. These men are liars, but the law is clear, and everyone knows it. Deuteronomy chapter 19. On the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness, 2 witnesses. That is all it takes. The law that was meant to protect the innocent has been twisted into a weapon to destroy the righteous. Uriah sits among the elders, his jaw clenched so tightly it aches. He wants to stand. He wants to shout that this is a lie, that these men have been bought, that Naboth is innocent. But his legs will not move. Fear has paralyzed him. Silence has become his prison. Naboth looks at the elders, searching their faces for any sign of support, any glimmer of justice. But they avoid his eyes, every one of them. Even as Uriah, his father's old friend, stares at the ground as if the stones hold more truth than the man standing before them. Please, Naboth's voice cracks. You know me. You know my family. We have walked in the ways of the Lord for generations. These men lie, but no one speaks. The silence is deafening, damning. The lead elder stands, his voice flat and formal. The law requires the testimony of 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses have spoken. The charge is blasphemy. The sentence is death by stoning. Naboth's wife screams. The sound rips through the square like a wound tearing open. His sons try to run to him, but hands hold them back. The crowd shifts, some weeping, some looking away, some already picking up stones as if eager to be done with the ugly business. Naboth stands alone in the center of the assembly, surrounded by his own people, condemned by his own law. He does not weep, he does not beg. Instead, he lifts his eyes to the sky and speaks, his voice carrying across the square with unshakable clarity. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It is the Shema, the great declaration of faith, the prayer every Hebrew child learns before they can walk. And in this moment, it is both a confession and a defiance. And this ground you stand on, Naboth continues, his voice rising. It is his, not Ahab's, not Jezebel's, his. You may take my blood, but you cannot take his covenant. A ripple of unease moves through the crowd. Some lower their stones, a few turn away, but most harden their faces, clinging to the comfort of obedience, the safety of doing what they are told. When faithfulness becomes rebellion, who will stand with the innocent? The crowd shifts uneasily in the square. Naboth's words hang in the air like smoke that will not dissipate. Some of the people gathered here have known him since childhood. They have bought grapes from his vineyard, shared meals at his table, prayed beside him in the synagogue, and now they are being asked to believe that this man, this quiet, faithful man, has cursed the very God he has served his entire life. A young man near the back of the assembly holds a stone in his hand. His name is Joel, and he is Naboth's neighbor. Their fields share a boundary. Their children play together. Just last month, Naboth helped him repair a broken plow, refusing payment, saying only, "This is what neighbors do." Joel's hand trembles. The stone feels impossibly heavy. He looks at Naboth standing in the center of the square and then at the two witnesses who have accused him. Their eyes are dead, their voices mechanical, everything about them screams falsehood. What if he's right? Joel whispers to the man beside him. What if we're about to kill a righteous man? The other man, older and harder, does not look at him. Then his blood is on the heads of the elders who judged him. We are only obeying who? Joel asks, his voice breaking. The elders or God? The older man's jaw tightens. Lower your voice, boy. Questions like that will get you standing where Naboth stands. Joel falls silent, but the stone remains in his hand, unthrown. At the front of the assembly, the lead elder raises his hand. His voice cuts through the murmuring crowd. The judgment has been pronounced. Let the sentence be carried out according to the law. Take him outside the city and stone him. Naboth's wife collapses. Her sons catch her, their own tears streaming, their young faces twisted with confusion and rage. Father, the oldest cries out, "Father, run." But Naboth does not run. He stands perfectly still, his eyes no longer on the crowd, but fixed on something beyond them, something invisible to everyone else. His lips move in silent prayer. The guards move forward to take him. Naboth does not resist. As they lead him through the crowd toward the city gate, people part like water around a stone. No one wants to touch him, as if innocence might be contagious, as if righteousness might stain them. But one person does step forward. Uriah, the old elder who has sat silent through the entire proceeding, suddenly rises from his seat. For a moment, it seems as if he might speak, might confess the truth, might stop this horror before it is too late. The crowd holds its breath as Uriah opens his mouth. His lips form the beginning of a word, but then his eyes find Jezebel's messenger standing at the edge of the square, watching, recording, ensuring the queen's will is executed precisely. And as Uriah's courage dies before it can draw breath, he sits back down. Naboth sees the old man's face as he passes. Their eyes meet for a single searing moment. Naboth's expression holds no anger, no accusation, only a deep, terrible sadness. The sadness of a man watching another man choose survival over truth. They lead him outside the city walls to a rocky depression that has witnessed too many executions. The place is barren, nothing grows here. The ground is stained dark with old blood. The guards position Naboth in the center, greater than. The crowd follows slowly, reluctantly, like mourners at a funeral they have been forced to attend. The two false witnesses take their positions at the front as the law requires the accusers must cast the first stones. Naboth looks at them directly. You know you lie, and God knows you lie. When you close your eyes tonight, you will see my face, and you will have to live with what you have purchased with your false words. The first witness flinches, but says nothing. He lifts his stone. Naboth turns his face upward. Lord, see, you see what men do in your name. You see how they twist your law to serve their evil. You see, and you will remember. The first stone flies. It strikes Naboth's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain explodes through his body, but he does not cry out. He steadies himself, regains his footing, his eyes still fixed on heaven. The second witness throws. This stone catches Naboth in the ribs. He gasps, doubling over, but still he does not curse, does not beg, does not recount words he never spoke. The crowd hesitates. No one wants to be the third to throw, but the pressure is immense. To refuse now is to question the judgment, to question the elders, to question the throne itself. And so slowly, reluctantly, one by one, stones begin to fly. Joel, still standing at the back, cannot bring himself to throw. He watches in horror as the man who helped him, who laughed with his children, who prayed for his sick wife, is buried beneath a hail of stones. Tears stream down Joel's face. The stone in his hand grows slick with sweat. An older man beside him notices. Throw it, boy, unless you want to be next. I can't. Then you're a fool, and fools don't survive under Jezebel. The older man takes the stone from Joel's trembling hand and hurls it himself. The stoning continues. Minutes stretch into an eternity. Naboth's body jerks with each impact, his blood mixing with the dust, but through it all his lips continue to move in prayer. His eyes remain open, fixed on the sky as if he sees something breaking through the clouds that no one else can perceive. Finally, mercifully, his body goes still. The crowd falls silent, the stones stop. Someone whispers, "It is finished." But nothing is finished. Everything is just beginning. Naboth's blood pools in the dust, dark and accusing. A single grape fallen from someone's basket, crushed underfoot, rolls slowly through the dirt and comes to rest in the blood, staining it a deeper red. The symbolism is lost on no one. The fruit of the vineyard, the fruit of faithfulness, drowning in innocent blood. The crowd disperses quickly. No one wants to linger. No one wants to look too closely at what they have just done. They hurry back through the city gate, wiping their hands on their robes, as if the stain of this murder could be so easily removed. Joel remains behind, staring at Naboth's broken body. He thinks of his own children, playing in his own small field, greater than greater than greater than greater than. He thinks of the boundary line between his land and Naboth's vineyard, the landmark set by their fathers, protected by the law of God, worth dying for. What have we become? He whispers to no one. A guard approaches. But go home, boy, there's nothing more to see here. But there is everything to see here. There is the corpse of a righteous man murdered by religious law, twisted into a weapon. There is the silence of those who knew better but said nothing. There is the question that will haunt Joel for the rest of his life. If they can kill Naboth for obeying God, who among us is safe? He walks home slowly, the unanswered question heavy on his shoulders. In the palace, Jezebel receives word within the hour. A messenger arrives, breathless and efficient. It is done. My queen Naboth is dead. Jezebel does not smile. This is not pleasure. This is simply power functioning as it should. She dismisses the messenger and goes to find Ahab. He is in his chamber, eating for the first time in days. The color has returned to his face. He looks up when she enters, hope and dread mingling in his eyes. Arise, Jezebel says, her voice smooth as oil. Take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. Ahab sets down his food. For a moment, something flickers across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or fear, or the faint ghost of a conscience he thought he had long since buried. But the moment passes quickly. The vineyard is his. That is all that matters. He is dead, stoned for blasphemy. The elders confirmed the witnesses. It was done according to the law. The law, that word again twisted and bent until it serves evil instead of justice. Ahab nods slowly. He does not ask the details. He does not want to know. That afternoon, King Ahab walks down the road from the palace to Naboth's vineyard. He walks alone, savoring the moment. The vineyard is his now. The obstacle is removed. The inconvenient man with his inconvenient convictions is buried outside the city walls. Ahab enters through the gate and stands among the vines. He runs his hands along the branches, feeling the fruit that is nearly ripe. He can already envision the herb garden he will plant, the quiet afternoons he will spend here, away from the noise of court and kingdom. He breathes deeply, satisfied. But from the edges of the vineyard, hidden among the trees, two sets of eyes watch him. Naboth's wife and sons have come to see their inheritance stolen to witness the final injustice. The oldest son, barely 16, clenches his fist so tightly his nails draw blood from his palms. Mother, we have to do something. His mother, her face, a mask of grief and fury, shakes her head. What can we do? We are nothing. He is the king, but this is our land, grandfather's land. Father died protecting it. And if we fight, we will die too. And then who will remember your father's faithfulness? The boy has no answer. They watch in silence as Ahab inspects his stolen property, as he smiles at the vines, as he makes plans for a future built on murder. Finally, Naboth's wife turns away. Come, we are exiles now. This place is no longer ours. It was never ours, the boy says bitterly. It was God's. Father said so. Then let God defend his own property. His mother replies, her voice breaking. Because he did not defend your father. They walk away from the vineyard, away from their home, away from everything they have ever known. Behind them, Ahab continues his inspection, oblivious to the eyes that have watched him, oblivious to the grief he has caused, oblivious to the fact that every step he takes on this stolen ground is being recorded in a courtroom far beyond his reach. That night, Uriah sits in his home, unable to eat, unable to sleep. The letter from Jezebel still sits on his table. He has read it so many times. The parchment is worn at the creases. His wife has stopped speaking to him. His children ask questions he cannot answer. He lights a lamp and pulls out a blank scroll. For hours he sits with a pen in his hand trying to write a letter to someone, anyone who might hear the truth. A letter to the high priest in Jerusalem, a letter to the prophets, if any, still survive, a letter to God himself. But every time he touches pen to parchment, his hand begins to shake. What good would it do? Jezebel would hear of it. He would be the next one standing in the square. His own children would watch him stoned. He sets the pen down. A single drop of ink falls from the tip, landing on the parchment, spreading slowly across the white surface like blood seeping into sand. He watches it spread and thinks of Naboth's blood soaking into the ground outside the city. He does nothing, and in doing nothing, he becomes something he never thought he would be, an accomplice. Silence, he is learning, is not neutral. Silence has weight. Silence makes choices. And tonight his silence has chosen Jezebel's side. He blows out the lamp and sits in the darkness. A righteous man who failed to be righteous when it mattered most. But far from the palace, far from the city of Jezreel, far from the power and politics and murder dressed as law, something is stirring. In the wilderness, in the hidden places where prophets go, when the land has become too corrupted to bear their presence, a man is praying. His name is Elijah, and he has just received a message from heaven. The days following Naboth's death are unnaturally quiet in Jezreel. The city moves through its routines with force normally, but beneath the surface, everyone can feel it. A wrongness that cannot be named, a guilt that cannot be washed away. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly now pass in silence. The marketplace conducts its business in hushed tones. Joel, the young man who could not bring himself to throw his stone, has stopped sleeping. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees Naboth's face turned toward heaven, lips moving in prayer. Even as the stones fell, he sees the blood pooling in the dust. He sees his own trembling hand holding a stone he never threw but never spoke against. His wife notices the dark circles under his eyes. "You did not kill him," she says softly. "You did not throw." "I did not stop it either," Joel replies, his voice hollow. "Is there a difference?" She has no answer. In the palace, Ahab spends his days planning the renovation of his new acquisition. He brings architects and gardeners to walk the vineyard, discussing layouts and plantings. He speaks of raised beds for herbs, a fountain in the center, perhaps a small pavilion for shade. He never mentions Naboth's name. It is as if the previous owner simply vanished. But at night, alone in his chamber, Ahab cannot escape a persistent unease. He hears sounds in the darkness, footsteps where there should be none, whispers that fade when he turns to listen. Once he could have sworn he heard someone speaking the words of the Shema, but when he called for the guards, they found no one. Jezebel notices his restlessness, but dismisses it with contempt. "You are king. Kings take what they need. It is the order of things. But the law is whatever we say it is." She interrupts. "Naboth broke the law. He was judged. He was punished. It is finished." But Ahab is not so sure it is finished. Meanwhile, word of Naboth's execution spreads beyond Jezreel. Travelers carry the story from town to town. Merchants whisper it in marketplaces. And with each retelling, the story grows darker, more shameful, more damning. Far to the north, in the wilderness of Gilead, where the wind howls and the rocks hide caves and secret springs, a prophet named Elijah kneels in prayer. He has been here for months, hiding from Jezebel's murderous campaign against the prophets of the Lord. He has heard nothing of Naboth, but the Lord carries news from every corner of creation. And now the Lord speaks. The voice comes not as thunder or earthquake, but as a quiet, irresistible certainty settling over Elijah's spirit. "Arise, go down to meet Ahab, king of Israel, who is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession. And you shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, have you killed and also taken possession?" Elijah's eyes snap open. He has not heard the story, but now he knows it with the terrible clarity that comes when God reveals hidden evil. A man has been murdered. A vineyard has been stolen, and the king who orchestrated it walks the stolen ground as if it is his by right. Elijah rises slowly, his joints stiff from kneeling, his face weathered by sun and solitude. He gathers his rough cloak and begins the long journey south. He walks alone, as prophets must. No entourage, no guards, no letters of introduction. Just a man and a message. The journey takes days. In one village he stops at a well to draw water. An old woman sits nearby grinding grain. She looks up at him with tired eyes. "You are a prophet," she says. "It is not a question." "I am. Then tell me, where is the Lord? We pray, but the heavens are silent. We obey, but the wicked prosper. I heard about Naboth, the vineyard keeper in Jezreel. They say he was murdered for obeying God. What hope is there for the rest of us?" Elijah sets down the water jar. "The hope is this. God sees, God remembers, and God will not be mocked. Naboth's blood cries out from the ground, and the Lord has heard it. The king thinks he has won, but he has only purchased his own judgment. The old woman nods slowly. Then go, prophet, speak your word. Elijah continues south through valleys and over hills, past fields brown and cracked from drought. He reaches Jezreel as the sun begins its descent. He circles the city, following a path he somehow knows. Guided by something beyond his own knowledge, he comes to the vineyard. Even from a distance, he can see it has changed. Workers are pulling up old vines in one section, preparing the ground for new plantings. Ahab's plans are already underway. The land that was Naboth's inheritance is being torn apart to make room for a king's garden. Elijah stands at the edge of the property, watching, waiting. A righteous anger burns in his chest. Not the wild fury of human vengeance, but the focused, controlled wrath of heaven. Inside the vineyard, Ahab walks among the vines, pointing out changes to his steward. Remove these older sections. Plant mint here and thyme along this row. The steward nods. And the stone altar, my lord, the old one in the corner. Ahab waves dismissively. Remove it. It is an eyesore. The steward bows and withdraws. Ahab stands alone among the vines, running his hand along a thick trunk. For a moment something like regret flickers through him. These vines are older than he is, planted by men whose names he does not know, but the moment passes. The vineyard is his now. He turns to leave, and that is when he sees him. A figure standing at the vineyard gate, tall, gaunt, dressed in rough camel's hair, a leather belt around his waist. The setting sun casts his shadow long across the ground. Ahab's blood goes cold. He knows this man, Elijah the Tishbite. For a long moment, neither speaks. They stand on opposite ends of the vineyard. The king in silken crown, the prophet in animal skins and dust. Finally, Ahab finds his voice. It comes out strangled, defensive. Have you found me, O my enemy? Elijah's response is calm, implacable. I have found you. 3 words. But they land like hammer blows. Not I have sought you, but I have found you. As if Ahab is the one who has been hiding, running, lost in his own sin and only now being discovered. And what do you want? Ahab demands, his voice cracking. Elijah steps forward, entering the vineyard. Each footfall is deliberate, purposeful. I have found you because you have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. The words hang in the air. Sold yourself, not stumbled into evil, not been deceived. Sold yourself. A transaction, a choice, a deliberate exchange of righteousness for desire. Elijah continues, his voice rising with prophetic authority. And thus says the Lord, have you killed and also taken possession? In the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth shall dogs lick your own blood. The prophecy strikes like lightning. Ahab staggers back a step, his face draining of color. Dogs licking blood, his blood in this very place. But Elijah is not finished. Behold, I will bring disaster upon you. I will utterly burn you up, and will cut off from Ahab every male in Israel. And I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, for the anger to which you have provoked me, and because you have made Israel to sin. Each sentence is a death sentence. Not just for Ahab, but for his entire dynasty. Everything he has built, every son he has raised, all of it will be cut off, burned away, erased. And then Elijah's gaze shifts toward the palace where Jezebel sits. And of Jezebel the Lord also said, the dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. Ahab's knees buckle. He grabs a vine to steady himself. The very wood he murdered to possess now holding him up as his world collapses. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat. And anyone of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the heavens shall eat. The vineyard is utterly silent. The only sound is Ahab's ragged breathing. And there was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord like Ahab, whom Jezebel his wife incited. Elijah turns to leave. He has delivered his message, but before he reaches the gate, Ahab's voice stops him. Wait. Elijah turns back. Ahab has collapsed fully now, sitting in the dirt among the vines he stole, his royal robes stained with dust. Tears stream down his face. Is there no mercy, no way back? For the first time, something like compassion flickers across Elijah's weathered face. That is between you and the Lord you have spent your reign defying. But know this, the word has been spoken, the judgment is set, and Naboth's blood will not cry out forever unanswered. Elijah walks out of the vineyard, leaving the king of Israel weeping among stolen vines. Surrounded by the ghost of a righteous man whose only crime was obedience to God, the sun sets over Jezreel, casting the vineyard in shadows of deep purple and gold. Ahab remains on the ground long after Elijah has gone, his body racked with sobs he cannot control. For years he has been a king who took what he wanted, who bent the law to his will, who silenced opposition with gold or steel. But now faced with a judgment he cannot bribe or threaten or negotiate, he is simply a man, terrified and alone. A servant eventually finds him there, collapsed among the vines. The young man approaches cautiously, unsure whether to speak. "My lord, the queen has sent for you." The evening meal is prepared. Ahab does not respond. He stares at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. These hands signed the decree. These hands took possession of stolen land. These hands are stained with innocent blood, and no amount of washing will make them clean. "My lord, leave me," Ahab whispers. The servant hesitates, then bows and retreats. He will report to Jezebel that the king has been found, but something is wrong. Something has broken in him. Ahab rises slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. He walks through the vineyard one more time, but now every vine seems to accuse him. The soil that should have been fertile ground for his pleasure garden feels like cursed earth beneath his feet. He can almost hear Naboth's voice carried on the evening wind. "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." He stumbles back toward the palace, but he does not go to the dining hall where Jezebel waits. Instead, he goes to his private chambers and does something he has not done in years. Something that would shock his court and enrage his queen if they knew. He tears his royal robes. The sound of fabric ripping echoes in the stone chamber. Ahab pulls the fine silk from his shoulders and casts it to the floor. He removes his crown and sets it aside. Greater than he calls for sackcloth, the rough, uncomfortable garment worn by mourners and penitents, and wraps it around his body. His servants watch in stunned silence. One of them, an older man who remembers when Ahab was a young prince full of promise and potential, feels tears sting his eyes. The king is repenting. After all these years of hardness, of cruelty, of idolatry, something has finally broken through. Ahab lies down on his bed, still wearing the sackcloth. He does not call for food. He does not call for wine. He simply lies there, face turned to the wall, and for the first time in his reign, he prays to the God of Israel. The words come haltingly, rusty from disuse. "Lord, I have sinned. I have done evil in your sight. The blood of Naboth, his righteousness, his faithfulness." He cannot continue. The weight of what he has done presses down on him like a physical force. In the throne room, Jezebel paces like a caged lioness. She has heard the reports. Elijah appeared in the vineyard. Ahab collapsed. The king is now wearing sackcloth and refusing food. She dismisses it all as weakness, as the foolish superstition of a man who never fully abandoned the old religion. "Let him fast," she tells her attendants. "He will recover, he always does." But in her private chambers that night, even Jezebel feels a tremor of unease. She thinks of Elijah's words reported to her by spies. "The dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezebel." She laughs it off, but the laughter sounds hollow even to her own ears. She goes to the window and looks out over the city. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the walls lies Naboth's body, buried quickly and without honor. She feels no remorse. She has orchestrated the deaths of dozens of prophets, hundreds of those who opposed her will. One vineyard keeper means nothing, but still the unease lingers. She turns from the window and calls for wine, drinking deeply, trying to drown the feeling that something has shifted in the heavens, that some great wheel has begun to turn, and she stands directly in its path. In the vineyard, now empty and silent under the stars, something remarkable happens. The wind picks up, moving through the ancient vines with a sound almost like breathing, and if anyone were there to see it, they would notice something strange. The vine that Ahab grabbed to steady himself when Elijah pronounced judgment has begun to wither. Its leaves curl and brown. Its branches lose their strength as if the very plant refuses to support the hand that murdered its keeper, but no one is there to see. The vineyard stands as a silent witness, waiting for the judgments that have been spoken to unfold in their appointed time. In his chamber, Ahab cannot sleep. He rises before dawn and does something that shocks his entire household. He goes on foot, still wearing sackcloth, to the outskirts of the city where Naboth is buried. He stands at the grave, unmarked and simple, and whispers words only the dead and God can hear. "I cannot bring you back. I cannot undo what was done, but I'm sorry. Before heaven, I am sorry. It is not enough." He knows it is not enough, but it is all he has to offer. He returns to the palace and continues his fast. Days pass, his advisors grow concerned. Jezebel grows angry, but Ahab will not be moved. He walks softly, speaks quietly, and refuses every luxury. The servants whisper that the king has lost his mind, but the older ones, those who remember the faith of their fathers, whisper something else. The king is doing penance. Far to the north, Elijah sits in his wilderness cave. The word of the Lord comes to him again, and this time, there is something unexpected in it, something that speaks to the mysterious mercy of God. Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days, I will bring the disaster upon his house. Elijah sits in silence, processing this. The judgment stands. The dynasty will fall, but because of one moment of genuine repentance, because Ahab tore his robes and wore sackcloth and walked softly before the Lord, the execution of judgment has been delayed. Not cancelled, but delayed. It is a strange mercy, one that does not erase consequences, but grants a measure of grace in their timing. Ahab will die as all men die, but he will not live to see his sons cut off, his house destroyed, his name erased. That horror will come, but not yet. Elijah closes his eyes and thanks God for mysteries he does not fully understand, for judgments that are just and mercies that are undeserved, for a God who sees the heart even when the hands are stained with blood. Back in Jezreel, life slowly returns to its rhythms. Ahab eventually resumes eating, though he does so sparingly. He returns to governing, though with less arrogance, less certainty. The vineyard sits untouched. He cannot bring himself to enter it again. The herbs are never planted. The fountain is never built. It remains as it was, a monument to a crime and a prophecy. July, the young neighbor who held a stone he never threw, begins to sleep again, but he has changed. He starts attending the synagogue more regularly, reading the Torah with new urgency, teaching his children the importance of standing for righteousness, even when it costs everything. One evening, his son asks him, "Father, why do you always talk about Naboth?" Joel kneels down and places his hands on the boy's shoulders. "Because, my son, I want you to be the kind of man who throws away his stone rather than his integrity. I want you to understand that silence in the face of evil is its own kind of evil, and I want you to know that even when the whole world tells you to bow, there are some things worth standing for." The boy nods, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight of the words. In another part of the city, Azariah, the elder who received Jezebel's letter and did nothing, lives out his days in quiet misery. He fulfills his duties as elder, but the joy is gone from his life. His wife barely speaks to him. His children have lost respect for him, and every night when he closes his eyes, he sees Naboth's face looking at him across the assembly, asking without words, "Will you stand with me?" And every night Ariah's answer is the same shameful silence. He grows old before his time, bent not by years, but by the weight of cowardice. On his deathbed, years later, his final words will be a whispered apology to a man long dead. "I am sorry, I should have spoken, but that is still to come." For now, Jezreel exists in an uneasy tension, a city that has murdered righteousness and is waiting without knowing it for righteousness to have the final word. The people go about their business, but something has changed. There is a crack in the foundation of their world, and through that crack, light is beginning to break. Naboth's wife and sons live as exiles in a nearby village, surviving on the charity of distant relatives. The oldest son works as a laborer, doing the kind of hard, thankless work his father once did in their own vineyard. But he does it without bitterness. He has learned from his father's example that faithfulness is not measured by outcomes but by obedience. One evening, as he rests after a long day's work, his mother sits beside him. "Your father would be proud of you," she says softly. "Would he?" the boy asks. "We lost everything. The vineyard is gone. His name is forgotten." His mother shakes her head. "His name is not forgotten. God remembers, and that is enough." The boy looks at her, sees the strength in her weathered face, the faith that has not broken despite everything she has lost. "Do you think we will ever get it back? The vineyard? I do not know," she answers honestly. "But I know this, the land belongs to God. He allotted it to our fathers, and he has not forgotten his covenant. Whether we see it or not, whether we live to reclaim it or not, the inheritance remains because it was never truly ours to lose." The boy nods slowly, taking comfort in the words, even as his heart still aches for the home he can never return to. High in the palace, Ahab stands at his window, looking out over the city he rules but no longer controls. He has learned a terrible lesson. A man can gain the whole world or at least a small vineyard and lose something far more precious in the exchange. He thinks of Elijah's words, "Have you killed and also taken possession?" Yes, he has. And now he must live with the knowledge that everything he gained through murder tastes like ashes, while the man he murdered has gained something Ahab can never possess: the approval of God, the peace of a clear conscience, the inheritance that endures beyond death. For the first time in his life, Ahab understands that there are some transactions that cannot be made, some purchases that cost more than any man should pay, some victories that are in truth the most devastating of defeats. He turns from the window and walks softly through his palace, a king clothed in sackcloth, ruling over a kingdom he no longer fully believes in, waiting for a judgment he knows is coming but can no longer see. And in the stillness of that moment, a question hangs in the air, unanswered but undeniable. When a man stands between the command of a king and the command of God, which voice will he obey, and what will it cost him to choose rightly? 3 years pass. The drought that Elijah once prophesied finally breaks. Rain returns to Israel. The fields turn green again, and the land begins to heal from years of divine judgment. But though the earth recovers, the moral landscape of the nation continues to decay. Ahab's repentance, genuine as it was for a moment, proves shallow-rooted. Greater than, he returns to his old ways gradually, like a man slipping back into comfortable chains. Jezebel's influence remains absolute. The altars to Baal still stand. The prophets of the Lord remain in hiding or in exile, and the memory of Naboth, though it haunts a few sensitive souls, fades from the public consciousness. The vineyard sits unused, overgrown with weeds, a silent testimony to a crime the nation prefers to forget, but heaven does not forget. In the northern territories, Syria has grown bold. King Benhadad masses his armies and threatens Israel's borders. Ahab, ever the pragmatist, forms an alliance with Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, to counter the Syrian threat. It is a convenient partnership. Judah brings legitimacy. Israel brings military might. The two kings meet in Samaria to plan their campaign. Jehoshaphat arrives with his entourage, and the reunion is warm, full of diplomatic pleasantries and strategic discussions. But beneath the surface, Jehoshaphat is uneasy. He is a righteous king, a man who has tried to lead Judah back to the worship of the Lord, and now he finds himself in alliance with Ahab, whose reputation for wickedness has spread even to Jerusalem. They sit in council, maps spread before them, generals debating tactics. Ahab proposes a bold plan. They will march together to Ramoth-Gilead, a strategic city that Syria has captured. They will reclaim it by force. Jehoshaphat listens, nods, but then raises his hand. Nah, the plan is sound, but before we march to war, should we not inquire of the Lord? The room falls silent. Ahab's advisors shift uncomfortably. It has been years since anyone in this court seriously inquired of the Lord. Jezebel's prophets of Baal are consulted regularly, but the God of Israel, he has been sidelined, ignored, treated as irrelevant to the affairs of state. Ahab, sensing Jehoshaphat's discomfort and wanting to maintain the alliance, agrees. Of course, bring the prophets. Within the hour, 400 prophets are assembled in the courtyard, but these are not prophets of the Lord. They are court prophets, men who have learned to tell the king what he wants to hear, who have made comfortable livings by prophesying prosperity and victory regardless of truth. They stand before the two kings, and Ahab poses the question, "Shall I go to battle against Ramoth-Gilead, or shall I refrain?" The response is immediate and unanimous. "Go up, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king." One prophet, particularly theatrical, has fashioned horns of iron and waves them dramatically. "Thus says the Lord, with these you shall push the Syrians until they are destroyed." The other prophets echo his enthusiasm, and to go up to Ramoth-Gilead and triumph, the Lord will give it into the king's hand. It is exactly what Ahab wants to hear, but Jehoshaphat watches the spectacle with growing unease. There is something rehearsed about their prophecy, something hollow. These men speak with one voice, but it does not sound like the voice of God. He leans toward Ahab. "Is there not another prophet of the Lord here of whom we may inquire?" Ahab's face darkens. He knows exactly who Jehoshaphat means, and the thought fills him with dread and resentment. "There is yet one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil." Jehoshaphat's response is gentle but firm. "Let not the king say so." Ahab has no choice. To refuse now would offend his ally and expose his fear. He sends a messenger to bring Micaiah from wherever he has been kept, likely in some form of house arrest or enforced silence. While they wait, the 400 prophets continue their performance, whipping themselves into greater fervor, assuring the kings of certain victory. But Jehoshaphat sits quietly, his hands folded, his eyes closed in prayer. He knows something is wrong. He can feel it. The messenger finds Micaiah in a small house on the outskirts of Samaria. The prophet is older now, his beard gray, his body thin from years of persecution and poverty, but his eyes are clear. And when the messenger delivers the summons, Micaiah knows exactly what is happening. The messenger, trying to be helpful, offers advice. "Look, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them and speak favorably." Micaiah looks at the young man with something like pity. As the Lord lives, what the Lord says to me that I will speak. They walk together to the palace. Micaiah has not been in the royal court for years. The last time he spoke truth to power, it earned him a slap across the face and imprisonment. But he has learned that a prophet's calling is not to survive, but to speak, regardless of the cost. He enters the courtyard where the two kings sit enthroned, surrounded by their prophets and advisors. All eyes turn to him. The 400 prophets fall silent, sensing a threat to their carefully constructed narrative. Ahab leans forward. Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth-Gilead, to battle, or shall we refrain? For a moment Micaiah says nothing. He looks at the king who murdered Naboth, who stole his vineyard, who humbled himself briefly and then returned to wickedness. He looks at the 400 prophets who have made careers out of lying in God's name, and he makes a choice that will cost him everything. With heavy irony dripping from every word, he echoes the false prophets. Go up and triumph. The Lord will give it into the hand of the king, but his tone betrays him. The sarcasm is obvious. Ahab's face flushes with anger. How many times shall I make you swear that you speak to me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Micaiah's expression hardens. The moment of mockery is over. Now comes the true word, and it will not be pleasant. I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, These have no master. Let each return to his home in peace. The courtyard erupts. The 400 prophets shout in protest. Ahab turns to Jehoshaphat with vindication in his voice. Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? But Micaiah is not finished. He raises his voice above the chaos. Therefore, hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing beside him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, Who will entice Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, By what means? And he said, I will go out and will be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, You are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go out and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets. The Lord has declared disaster for you. The silence that follows is absolute. Ma has just declared that the 400 prophets are not speaking for God, but for a lying spirit, that their unanimous prophecy of victory is a divine trap, and that Ahab is marching not toward triumph, but toward his own death. One of the court prophets, Zedekiah, the one with the iron horns, strides forward and strikes Micaiah across the face. And which way did the Spirit of the Lord go from me to speak to you, Micaiah? Blood trickling from his split lip meets his gaze steadily. Behold, you shall see on that day when you go into an inner chamber to hide yourself. Ahab rises from his throne, trembling with rage. Born seize him and take him back to Ammon, the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, Thus says the king, Put this fellow in prison, and feed him with meager rations of bread and water until I come in peace. Micaiah, being dragged away by guards, calls back over his shoulder, If you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. Then addressing the entire assembly, he adds, Hear, all you peoples. They throw him into a dark cell beneath the palace. The door slams shut. Micaiah sits in the darkness, his face throbbing from the blow, his body weak from hunger, his future uncertain, but there is peace in his heart. He has spoken the truth. What happens now is between Ahab and God. In the courtyard above, Ahab paces. Jehoshaphat watches him carefully. The alliance is strained now, teetering on the edge of collapse. Jehoshaphat has heard two opposing prophecies, 400 saying victory, one saying death, and deep in his spirit, he knows which one is true, but he has already committed his forces. The armies are assembled. To turn back now would be seen as cowardice, would weaken his standing in the region. So he makes a choice that will haunt him. He stays. Oh dear, we march at dawn. Ahab announces that night. Ahab cannot sleep. He lies awake, staring at the ceiling, Micaiah's words echoing in his mind. I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. Sheep without a shepherd. A king who will not return. He thinks of Elijah's prophecy from 3 years ago. In the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick your own blood? He had worn sackcloth, had fasted, had humbled himself, and God had delayed the judgment, but delayed is not cancelled. Is this the appointed time? Is Ramoth-Gilead the place where the prophecy will be fulfilled? Fear grips him like a physical force, but he has already given the order. To cancel now would be to admit that Micaiah is right, that the 400 are wrong, that his entire court is built on lies, and Ahab is too proud, too invested in the illusion to face that truth. So he does what fearful men often do. He makes a plan born of desperation and delusion. The next morning, as the armies prepare to march, Ahab calls Jehoshaphat aside. "I have been thinking. The Syrians know my face. They will target me specifically in battle. So, I will disguise myself. I will go into battle in ordinary armor, unrecognizable. But you should wear your royal robes. Let them see a king." Jehoshaphat agrees, not fully understanding the trap Ahab is setting. Ahab is not just hiding himself, he is making Jehoshaphat the target, hoping that if one of them must die to fulfill Micah's prophecy, it will be the king of Judah instead of the king of Israel. They march to Ramoth Gilead. The armies form up. The Syrians meet them on the field, and as the battle begins, Ahab watches from a distance, hidden among the common soldiers, believing he has outsmarted both prophet and God. But a man cannot hide from a word spoken by heaven. The machinery of divine judgment once set in motion cannot be stopped by disguises or clever tactics or desperate compromises. In his cell beneath the palace, Micaiah prays, not for vindication, not for revenge, but for Israel, the people who will soon be scattered like sheep without a shepherd, who will suffer because their king chose power over righteousness, comfort over truth. And on the field of battle, an arrow is being fitted to a bow. The archer does not know who he is aiming at. He simply draws back the string and releases. The arrow flies. The battle rages across the hills of Ramoth Gilead, the clash of bronze on bronze, the shouts of warriors, the screams of the wounded, all of it blends into the terrible symphony of war. Dust rises in thick clouds, obscuring everything. In this chaos, Ahab believes he is safe, invisible among the ranks of common soldiers. The Syrian king Ben-Hur has given his commanders a specific order: fight with neither small nor great, but only with the king of Israel. 32 chariot commanders scour the battlefield, searching for royal armor and banners. They spot Jehoshaphat in his royal robes and immediately converge on him. Terror seizes the king of Judah as Syrian warriors close in from every direction. He cries out, not a war cry but a prayer, desperate and urgent. And in that moment, the Syrian commanders draw close enough to see his face clearly and realize their mistake. This is not Ahab. They turn away, and Jehoshaphat escapes with his life. But while the enemy searches in vain for the king in royal robes, divine providence is arranging a very different appointment. On a distant part of the battlefield, a Syrian archer draws his bow. He is exhausted, his quiver nearly empty. He does not aim carefully, he simply pulls back the string and releases at random, hoping to strike something in the confusion. The arrow flies through the dust-choked air. It should miss. But this arrow does not fly by chance. It flies on a trajectory ordained before the battle began, before Ahab put on his disguise, before Micaiah spoke his prophecy, before Naboth's blood soaked into the ground. The arrow strikes Ahab between the scale armor and the breastplate, finding the one gap in his protection. It pierces deep, and Ahab gasps as white-hot pain explodes through his body. He slumps forward in his chariot, blood spreading across his tunic. His driver turns in horror. "My lord." Ahab grabs the edge of the chariot to steady himself. He can feel his life draining away with every heartbeat, but the battle is not yet decided. If word spreads that the king has fallen, his army will break and run. "Prop me up," he commands through gritted teeth. "Do not let them see I am wounded." Turn the chariot to face the Syrians. The driver, tears streaming down his face, obeys. He positions Ahab upright so that the king appears to be watching the battle. But Ahab is dying. The blood pools at his feet, mixing with the dust of the chariot floor. Hours pass. The sun climbs toward its zenith and begins its descent. Ahab remains upright, his eyes glazing over, his breath growing shallow. His mind begins to wander. He sees Naboth standing among the vines. He sees Elijah at the vineyard gate, pronouncing judgment. He sees Micaiah's bloody face. "I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd." Sheep without a shepherd. That is what he has made them. The sun touches the horizon. Ahab can no longer feel his legs. His hands are cold. "Retreat," he whispers to his driver. "Tell them to retreat." The command ripples through the Israelite ranks. Withdraw, fall back. The battle is lost. As Ahab's chariot turns toward camp, the king finally collapses. The driver catches him, lowering him gently to the chariot floor. Ahab's eyes flutter open one last time. He looks up at the darkening sky, his lips moving in words too faint to hear. King Ahab dies at sunset, slumped in his chariot, his blood pooled around him. The prophecy has been fulfilled. The cry goes up through the camp. Every man to his city, the king is dead. Panic spreads like wildfire. The army which held together through the long day of battle fractures instantly. Soldiers scatter in every direction. The sheep have lost their shepherd, exactly as Micaiah said. Ahab's chariot is brought back to Samaria. The journey takes 2 days. By the time they arrive, the blood has dried black on the chariot floor. They take the chariot to the pool of Samaria to clean it. As they pour water over the blood-stained wood, something happens that makes them step back in horror. Dogs, a pack of them, drawn by the smell of blood, come running. They push past the servants, their tongues lapping at the water now red with Ahab's blood. The servants try to drive them away, but the dogs are relentless. Frenzied, one of the older servants, a man who remembers Naboth, stands frozen. His lips form words from a prophecy spoken 3 years ago. In the place where dogs licked up the blood of Naboth shall dogs lick your own blood. Not in Jezreel where Naboth died, but in Samaria, where the order for his death was written. The king's blood mingles with water in the same pool where prostitutes wash themselves. A final humiliation for a man who traded his soul for a vegetable garden. In the palace, Jezebel receives word of her husband's death. She does not weep, she does not tear her robes. She simply sits very still, her mind already calculating. Ahab is dead, but she is not. She still has sons. She still has power. But even as she plots, a small voice whispers Elijah's prophecy. The dogs shall eat Jezebel within the walls of Jezreel. She silences the voice, but deep down, beneath the hardness and the pride, Jezebel feels something she has not felt in years. Fear. In his cell, Micaiah hears the news. A guard brings him word. The king is dead. He fell at Ramoth Gilead, just as you said. Micaiah closes his eyes. There is no triumph in his heart, only a deep, bone-weary sadness. He spoke truth, and truth costs the king his life. In Jezreel, Naboth's widow hears the news from a traveling merchant. King Ahab is dead. They say dogs licked his blood at the pool of Samaria. She sits down slowly, her hand over her mouth. Her sons gather around her. Mother, what does it mean? She looks at them with tears in her eyes. It means God remembered your father. It means righteousness was not forgotten. It means the blood of the innocent does not cry out in vain. The youngest son asks, will we get the vineyard back? I do not know, she admits. And does. But I know this. We serve a God who sees, a God who remembers, a God who in his own time makes all things right. As the sun sets on the day of Ahab's funeral, a lone figure stands at the edge of Naboth's vineyard. It is Joel, the young man who could not throw his stone. He looks at the overgrown vines, the crumbling altar, the weeds choking what was once carefully tended ground, and he weeps, not for Ahab, but for what could have been if the king had simply said no to his own desire, yes to the law of God, and walked away from a vineyard that was never his to take. The cost of that choice, one stolen vineyard, one murdered man, has now claimed a king, destabilized a nation, and set in motion events that will echo through generations, all for a garden of herbs that was never planted, all for a piece of ground that belonged to God. Years pass. Ahab's son Ahaziah takes the throne, but he is weak, sickly, more his mother's puppet than a true king. He falls through the lattice of his upper chamber and injures himself severely. In desperation, he sends messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether he will recover. But Elijah intercepts the messengers with a word from the Lord. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal-zebub? You shall not come down from the bed to which you have gone up, but you shall surely die. Ahaziah dies childless within the year. The throne passes to his brother Joram, who is marginally better, but still walks in the ways of his father and mother. The dynasty of Ahab continues, but it is rotting from within, diseased at its core. Jezebel remains the true power behind the throne. She has survived her husband's death, her son's death, and now manipulates her second son with the same iron will she once used to control Ahab. She is older now, her beauty fading, but her cruelty sharpened by years of practice. She has become a legend of wickedness, her name spoken with fear and disgust throughout Israel. But the word spoken by Elijah has not been forgotten. It waits, patient and inevitable for its appointed hour. That hour comes in the form of a young military commander named Juhai. He is fierce, ambitious, and tired of the corruption that has infected Israel under Ahab's dynasty. While leading troops against Syria at Ramoth Gilead, the same place where Ahab fell, Jehu receives an unexpected visitor. A young prophet, one of the company of prophets that Elisha has trained, arrives at the camp. He asks for Jehu privately, takes him into an inner chamber and pours oil on his head. The anointing is swift, almost furtive, and the words that accompany it are devastating. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anoint you king over the people of the Lord over Israel, and you shall strike down the house of Ahab, your master, so that I may avenge on Jezebel the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord, for the whole house of Ahab shall perish. and I will cut off from Ahab every male, bond or free, in Israel. The prophet continues, his voice rising with righteous fury. The dog shall eat Jezebel in the territory of Jezreel, and none shall bury her. Then, before Jehu can respond, the young prophet opens the door and runs, disappearing into the camp as quickly as he came. Jehu stands alone in the chamber, oil dripping down his face, the weight of divine commission settling on his shoulders. He has just been anointed king, but to claim the throne, he must destroy the current dynasty. He must become the instrument of a judgment pronounced decades ago in a stolen vineyard. He steps outside. His fellow commanders look at him with curiosity. Is all well? Why did this mad fellow come to you? Jehu tries to deflect, but you know the fellow and his talk, but they press him. That is not true. Tell us now. Jehu takes a breath, then speaks the words that will change the course of Israel's history. Thus says the Lord, I anoint you king over Israel. The response is immediate. His commanders spread their cloaks on the bare steps beneath him, creating a makeshift throne. They blow the trumpet and cry out, Jehu is king. Within hours, Jehu and his men are mounted and riding hard toward Jezreel. He drives his chariot furiously, so furiously that when the watchman on the tower of Jezreel sees the company approaching, he recognizes Jehu by his driving alone. The driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives furiously. King Joram, Ahab's son, is in Jezreel recovering from wounds received in battle. When he hears that Jehu is approaching, he assumes it is a military report. He orders his chariot made ready and rides out to meet him, taking with him Ahaziah, king of Judah, who is visiting. They meet at a property that makes every observer go silent with recognition. They meet at the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. The vineyard, still overgrown and unused, stands as a silent witness to what is about to unfold. The place where innocent blood was spilled is about to become the place where judgment is executed. Joram calls out, Is it peace? Jehu's response is cold, uncompromising. What peace can there be, so long as the whorings and the sorceries of your mother Jezebel are so many? Joram understands instantly. This is not a military report, this is a coup. He wheels his chariot around crying to Ahaziah, Treachery, O Ahaziah, but Jehu has already drawn his bow. The arrow flies straight and true, striking Joram between the shoulders, piercing his heart. The king of Israel collapses in his chariot, dead before he hits the floor. Jehu turns to his commander, Bidkar, take him up and throw him on the plot of ground belonging to Naboth the Jezreelite. Greater than greater than greater than greater than. For remember when you and I rode side by side behind Ahab his father, how the Lord made this pronouncement against him. As surely as I saw yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declares the Lord, I will repay you on this plot of ground. Now therefore take him up and throw him on the plot of ground in accordance with the word of the Lord. They lift Horam's body and cast it onto the field where Naboth died. The blood of Ahab's son soaks into the same ground that drank Naboth's blood. The circle of judgment is closing. Uzziah of Judah tries to flee, but is wounded in his chariot. He makes it as far as Megiddo before dying. Jehu continues his furious drive toward the palace of Jezreel. In her chambers, Jezebel hears the news. Joram is dead. Jehu is coming. The dynasty is falling. But Jezebel is not a woman who goes quietly into defeat. If she must die, she will die as a queen. She paints her eyes with kohl. She arranges her hair. She adorns herself in royal finery. Then she goes to the window overlooking the city gate and waits. When Jehu enters the gate, she calls down to him, her voice dripping with contempt. Is it peace, you Zimri, murderer of your master? It is a calculated insult. Zimri was a commander who killed his king and ruled for only 7 days before being overthrown and burning himself alive. She is suggesting that Jehu's reign will be equally short, that he is not a king but a traitor who will soon meet a traitor's end. But Jehu does not engage with her taunts. He looks up at the window and calls out, Who is on my side? Who 2 or 3 eunuchs look out at him from the upper windows. Servants who have endured years of Jezebel's cruelty, who have watched her manipulate and murder and destroy without consequence. Throw her down, Jehu commands. For a moment, no one moves. Then the eunuch sees Jezebel. She struggles, but she is one woman against multiple men. They drag her to the window and throw her down. Jezebel falls from the high window. Her scream cuts short as her body strikes the ground with a sickening impact. Her blood spatters on the wall. The horses trample her as Jehu drives his chariot over her body, entering the palace without a backward glance. Inside, Jehu eats and drinks, the business of kingship already occupying his mind. After some time, he says to his servants, See now to this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. But when the servants go out to bury her, they find only her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. Everything else has been devoured by the dogs of Jezreel. They return to Jehu with the news, and he nods slowly, recognition dawning. This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite. In the territory of Jezreel the dog shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel shall be as dung on the face of the field in the territory of Jezreel, so that no one can say, this is Jezebel. The prophecy is fulfilled to the letter. The woman who orchestrated Naboth's death, who wrote the letters that condemned an innocent man, whose hands signed the order for murder, is now nothing but scattered bones. The dogs have eaten her flesh, and in a final terrible irony, she has been consumed in the very city where Naboth died. Jezreel Jehu does not stop there. He systematically destroys every descendant of Ahab, fulfilling the totality of Elijah's prophecy. 70 sons are beheaded. Every official, every close friend, every priest who served the house of Ahab is put to death. The dynasty that began with compromise and flourished through cruelty is erased from the earth as if it never existed. The vineyard of Naboth, which Ahab coveted and Jezebel helped him steal, becomes a landmark not of royal ambition, but of divine justice. For generations after, people will point to it and tell the story of the righteous man who refused to sell his inheritance, the wicked king who murdered to possess it, and the God who remembered. And here is the final reversal, the truth that reorganizes everything that came before. Naboth lost his vineyard, but he kept his soul. Ahab gained a garden, but he forfeited eternity. Jezebel ruled with absolute power, but she died with less dignity than the poorest beggar. The world called Naboth a fool for refusing the king's offer. Heaven called him faithful. The land that Ahab stole and never used. The herbs he planned but never planted. The pleasure he pursued but never enjoyed. All of it became the instrument of his destruction. The very ground he murdered to possess became the place where his son's blood was spilled and his dynasty's judgment was executed. What looks like defeat in the moment can be victory in eternity. What appears to be weakness can be the strongest form of obedience, and what the powerful dismiss as insignificant, a small vineyard, a stubborn farmer, a word spoken by a prophet, can outlast empires and topple thrones. There are moments when obedience will cost you everything the world calls valuable, a career, a relationship, a piece of ground. But here is the truth Naboth knew. What you surrender to, stay faithful to God, you never truly lose, and what you gain by betraying him, you never truly keep. The vineyard stands today in the soil of history as a testimony. Naboth's name is remembered with honor, his faithfulness is recorded in scripture, his obedience echoes through millennia. But Ahab's name is synonymous with wickedness. Jezebel's name has become a curse, and their dynasty, which seemed so powerful and permanent, lasted barely a generation before being violently erased. If you are standing in your vineyard today, facing pressure to compromise, to bow, to let go of what God has called you to protect, know this, your obedience is not invisible, your pain is not forgotten, and the God who heard Naboth's blood crying from the ground hears you. 2. The Lord is near to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit. He sees every injustice, he marks every wound, and in his time, which is always perfect, and even when it is not quick, he makes all things right. Naboth chose God over the king, and heaven chose Naboth. If this story anchored your soul, subscribe, turn on the bell and share it with someone who needs to know. Faithfulness is never wasted.